if this were crack cocaine, this would get you 10 years to life in prison, up to life. Now, you don't actually, the government doesn't actually have to have cocaine in a case. They don't have to actually see cocaine. If I were an informant and I said, Joe sold me 50 grams, or Joe sold me a kilo, that testimony is as good as powder on the table.
Common law system is a system based on individual responsibility. Our legal system is really not designed to deal with groups of organized offenders. And so we get these weird conspiracy law things. I'm not surprised that excessive things have happened as a result.
The other trouble is RICO. The way RICO, the racketeering, which was built in an attempt to bring down, massive gang organization, mobsters, etc., these long-lasting conspiracies. If you actually read the RICO, you can be charged with violating the RICO Act by conspiring to conspire, which means that you've agreed to agree. That's not actually agreeing, but that's it. Yeah, we'll talk later. That can be enough for some very harsh sentencing penalties.
I now live in the Tenderloin District of San Francisco. I've been living there for about a year now. Back in 1999, I was arrested for conspiracy to distribute LSD. I was given a mandatory minimum of 10 years based upon paperweight that was seized during the course of the investigation of the conspiracy. What that means is paperweight is treated as pure LSD crystal.
The person in Iowa who ended up connecting the dot back to California and Malachar was another very old friend of mine. And the emotional weight of imagining what it must have been like for him to have to sit down and think to himself, do I do extra time or do I give up my friend? And there's essentially this weighing of value of years in an individual's life, and are my years out more valuable than the liberty of my friend? And so it really tore me up from an emotional level that he was put in this situation where he was looking at a hellaciously large amount of time or a relatively short amount of time in exchange for his brother.
What they came to me with is, kid, we know you quit. We know this, we know that. We just want to know where you got it from. I said, don't care. I don't care. They said, kid, okay, sign this plea deal. It says you're a major trafficker, you used minors to traffic your shit, and you obstructed justice because you told the snitch not to snitch on you, and you're a leader organizer, and that's all true, and we're gonna be nice and give you 15.5 years. I looked at him, I said, but I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I said, we don't care. That's our offer. Okay, take that offer and shove it up your ass. Their next thing was, you don't understand. We're gonna get you for 20 guaranteed. And we're gonna go for life. Do what we call the right thing. You know what the right thing is. Just help us out. Don't be a prick. 4 years, you'll be out in 2. I guarantee you'll be out in 2, if that. I really don't care. Next line was, we will go for life. You can get the death penalty. The answer is fuck you. So I went to trial. I would have signed for something I did. What I was guilty of, if they didn't bother with all the other weird shit they were trying to allege, would have gotten me 5 years in prison. And I would have signed on the dotted line in an instant. Not because I believe it's right, but because at the very least I could say, yeah, that's actually what I did. Instead, they wanted to make this bubble bigger and bigger, basically, until I agreed to testify, which is why they agreed to the phone count, because they knew 4 or 5 years was, what normally would happen in a case like that, where they had more leads, but they didn't have any other leads. They had already got a drug dealer who was supplying locally. They had already gotten like all these other players in Iowa, and they wanted somebody in California, and I was the only person fingered in California, and they knew I was getting it from somewhere, and that's what they wanted. They wanted a lab, and they figured with my nonchalance about supplying 2,000 hits every 3 months, which I didn't think was a big deal, but I guess in Iowa is like, some of the biggest shit on the planet. My nonchalance about it meant they thought I knew a cook. Whether I did or not is irrelevant, they thought I did.
I'm the president and founder of the Can Do Foundation, which is clemency for all nonviolent drug offenders, which I started when I got out of prison. Technically, I should still be in prison today because I was one of the lucky few that received clemency from President Clinton in 2000. Otherwise, I would be in prison until March of 2012. I was charged with conspiracy to manufacture, distribute, and import MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy. And a lot of people don't understand that conspiracy doesn't mean that you manufactured, imported, or distributed. It just means that you were associated with somebody who was allegedly manufacturing, distributing, or importing. The day they busted into my home, they made it very clear to my attorney. They wanted my cooperation, and he explained it to me. Cooperation means you will wear a wire. They think you're a very valuable tool. You will infiltrate Sandy's organization and set people up. And that's what they wanted me to do from day one. I couldn't even fathom that this was possible in America. I didn't know that people could be forced. Otherwise, if you don't cooperate, we'll indict you for conspiracy, and then you're looking at 20 to life. So that's the blackmail tool that comes in.
Well, when I first got to prison, you know, I couldn't believe, I was still in shock. You know, how could I get 20 years when there were no drugs found and there was no corroborating evidence? The only evidence was one person who was looking at a life sentence saying, you know, that I had done this and this. This person had never met me before in life. She lived in Fort Worth, Texas. I lived in Orange County, California. All this information that she provided is what, you know, the judge used to sentence me. And because that was so wrong, you know, I just couldn't come to terms with it. I mean, I just couldn't believe that, you know, they do people like that, you know. And but once I started talking to other people, just about everybody there was, you know, at least for drugs, were sentenced the same way.
For 2 years, I was harassed, and the Department of Justice knows how to kind of run a steer right into the slaughterhouse, and they have come up with a set of criteria or whatever that they follow, which is to alienate you, to scare you, to follow you, and to just keep making your life so miserable that you will break. I mean, you will eventually break.
Under current drug policy, and you ready for this, and I got numbers to back this up, we employ more civilian informants than the Stasi in East Germany under Soviet rule. That's real. We, per capita in total numbers, have more blacks in prison than apartheid South Africa. Who are we? Who are we as a nation?